would include buying and selling, retailing, probably from a homestead or from a side road or from a market. So a lot of our target groups are women that go to the market to sell their produce, to sell their retail goods. They buy things bulk and then they retail in the market. They produce things and then they do retailing. So a lot of it is involving commercial, business, commercial activities. Others are doing them shopkeeping and that kind of activity.
What's been the reaction from men in the community to this initiative?
The reaction is actually very mixed, but surprisingly, it's getting more and more positive. At the beginning, when the women started getting the impact of the loans, because we do tell them that with these loans, they're supposed to improve not only their economic well-being, but their social well-being and their political well-being. It become much more assertive, which often results when a woman has a bit of money in her pocket. So the men somehow were not very happy because some felt it's against the culture for the woman to have money. So there was a bit of resistance, but a lot of this is breaking down as the women really become much more, positive partners in the home. And I think the result and the way the women have used the money, which basically is to support the homes, it has encouraged a lot of men to think positively about the loan, the financial activities and the financial services that we are giving.
Eva Mukasa is the general manager of the Uganda Women's Finance Trust Fund. I spoke to her from Kampala. And you've been listening to Woman here on Good Morning Uganda. Coming up next, Reporter's Notebook, and we'll be turning the focus on the crisis in Zimbabwe and go back into history in Uganda. There are fears that Zimbabwe may well be turning the clock back. Zulfikar Rabbani has the details in our Reporter's Notebook. I'm Lucy Van Olden-Barneveld.
Zimbabwe's war veterans are turning the heat on Asian businesses in what they call Operation Liberation. The style's very much reminiscent of what happened in Uganda years back, and President Robert Mugabe appears to be turning a blind eye on the attempt to seize Asian businesses. Dr. Andy Chande is a well-known Indian businessman and former advisor to the late Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere. He sends a note of caution to both sides. Our correspondent, Trevor Grundy, has been talking to Dr. Chande in London.
Dr. Andy Chande is the former chairman of Tanzania's Standard newspapers. He chaired several parastatals following the 1967 Arusha Declaration, which attempted to transform a colonial administration into a socialist country. Dr. Chande said that trouble of a racial nature could be expected in any country where there's a huge gap between the haves and the have-nots. In Tanzania, he asserted there was never all that big a gap. But in Zimbabwe, the gap had been enormous, and he suggested that the British government should have done more to structure an imaginative land reform program. Now, however, the opportunity for out-of-control plundering is great. He said that when Idi Amin took the decision to expel something like 60,000 Asians, some black Ugandans saw this as an opportunity to do exactly what they liked.
When Amin decided that these people should go away, he certainly was praised by Ugandans, particularly black Ugandans and particularly Bugandans, because they thought that, well, there will be a vacuum that will be created and they will be able to take over the industry and the business and trade and commerce and transport. But as you know, the events have turned out that it was a disaster, really, because it ruined the economy of Uganda. It took Uganda 20 years back in the history. And it caused... But having said about the trauma of the Asians, in my opinion, the bigger trauma was of the black intelligentsia Ugandans, because I think about 200,000 people during the 9 years of Amin's administration were killed. And many of the intelligent and well-educated Ugandans decided to leave the country.
Dr. Chandy said that looking back, one could easily spot a series of post-independence mistakes made in Zimbabwe. White farmers, he said, should have shared more with blacks. They should have offered them land and technical help. Perhaps, he said, the Asians should have also opened up a bit more in Zimbabwe.
The Indians, by nature and temperament, tend to work very closely. They are a very tightly knit and perhaps clannish community. And they have a tendency, even in this country here, whilst they are here, they still have their own they want their own schools and they want their... So it has that kind of attitude does become counterproductive, and I think, in my view, it certainly has contributed, to some extent, in the feeling by the majority of the Ugandans that they were being alienated and that they were being marginalized because there was that lack of intermingling, social intermingling between the communities.
Dr. Chandy recalls the days of Idi Amin with alarm. Horror again surrounds him as he hears about another wave of anti-Asian phobia being released from a basket which once held hope, but which now seems only to contain despair. Trevor Grundy, London.
Still ahead on Good Morning Uganda, the vanilla crisis, ice cream, big business, Madagascar, and the Ugandan connection. Zulfikar Abani has been talking to a vanilla expert, and there is money to be made here. Big money. He'll tell you more when we return.